Здравствуйте, друзья! Мы продолжаем нашу серию видео-встреч, видеоинтервью с известными людьми, посвященную теме личной миссии и предназначения. И сегодня я действительно очень воодушевлен, потому что мне довелось побывать в гостях, пусть и по Зуму, у Майлза Дауни. Майлз Дауни — это замечательный британский коуч, автор книг. Вот у меня целых две есть на полке. Одна из них переведена на русский язык, называется «Эффективный коучинг», вторая еще не переведена. Прекрасная, она включает в себя группу авторов, один из которых партнер компании, в которой я тружусь, партнер компании Zest Leaders, Андрей Михаленко. В общем, Майлз — автор книг, и я могу называть этого человека своим наставником и вдохновителем, потому что я довольно много встречался с ним и работаю с ним, и Майлз давал мне обратную связь о том, как я развиваюсь и что я делаю в коучинге. В общем, я очень рад сегодня с ним встретиться. И я надеюсь, я уверен, что вам это будет интересно и полезно. Поэтому видео довольно длинное. Я предлагаю прямо сейчас ткнуть в лайк. Если интересно смотреть такие видео в будущем, то подписаться, поставить колокольчик, сделать вот все вот эти вот ритуальные штуки. Интервью с Майлзом на английском языке. Там нет голосового перевода, но есть субтитры, поэтому вы можете нажать на кнопочку с субтитрами внизу. Кроме того, если вам удобнее прочитать текст нашей беседы, так же, как и тексты других бесед, выложенные в моем блоге на Медиуме. Ссылка также есть в описании. Ну, хватит, наверное, предварительных слов. Поехали.
So great, Miles. Thank you so much for your support and participation in that video podcast or interview. Today, I planned to talk about concepts of calling, personal mission, life purpose, and so on. And what I'd suggest to start is how your view on coaching practice has evolved until now. I mean that you're a Tim Galway successor, right? As I am definitely yours. And your second book, Effective Coaching, by the way, I have it here, has that hook about performance. So, since coaching is rooted in tennis is about performance, and coaching is also about players' performance. But that book is about many other things than performance itself, including players' identity, potential, and development of potential. But your next book, which is here, Enabling Genius, centers around that concept of genius, which is much more than about performance itself. So, could you please explain what is genius or who is genius for you now and how you understand and how you deliver that concept?
So yes, and there are a number of ideas that are encapsulated within the idea of genius, and the very word itself is the starting place, because most people, when they hear you say that everybody has potential, their eyes glaze over and they nod their head, and the words don't land. They miss the target. People have heard that so often, the expression people have potential is meaningless. So if you say people have genius, you tend to upset people or at least cause them to think. At a conference in Malmo, an ICF conference where I gave a keynote some years back, at the end of my keynote, a gentleman approached me and said, "You can't say that everybody has genius." And he was angry. I mean, he was clearly angry. And I kind of looked and stopped and said, "Okay, but you're telling me, do you agree that people have potential?" He said, yes, of course people have potential. So I said, so what you're telling me is that people have potential, but it's capped. It's capped just short of genius.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of, you could see him kind of struggling with that idea that the potential could be capped, because it's so what it does, what the word is designed to do, is to get people to rethink that idea. And so what does it mean? Ultimately, it means whatever you want it to mean, that it's a construct. But the way I'm using it, when I use the word genius, what that is for me is the flowering of the individual. It's somebody when they express themselves and who they are completely in a given moment. That's genius. So that I don't mind if you're a musician playing a flute and for 30 seconds you play something perfectly and your world stops and everybody else's world stops, and it's a perfect moment of self-expression. Or if you're in whatever discipline you might think of. So one, it's complete self-expression. And then behind that, the research that we did brought us to the idea that you have control over about 50% of what you become. So studies with twins show that to be the case. You can influence about 50% of what you can become. So the other notion in Genius is find out what you're good at and get great at it. So when I play tennis, I'm very, very clear about what I'm good at on the tennis court, and all the coaching and training I do is to make sure that I do that better and better and better. And that comes back to that idea of identity. Who am I on the tennis court? Who am I as a leader? And that's what I coach people on. I was coaching a woman yesterday who is brilliant with her teams, brilliant with her clients, but struggles with a very male-dominated executive team. And we spoke about that, and it was clear that she has two strategies with the male dominance. Either she bullies them because she's what they are, that doesn't work, or she plays kind of little schoolgirl. Neither of these identities work. So to find the identity peer-to-peer that works in that environment was the need. So then identity is dependent on circumstance and situation. The sport you're playing, the activity you're doing.
So talking about that person's identities, how are identities connected with the idea of genius? I mean that you are talking about different multiple identities. It's an idea which I heard from Erminia Ibarra, I think. She is talking about that pretty much also. And it's quite popular that we have multiple identities. And do we have multiple geniuses, or it's one genius who unfolds in different types of behavior?
So in fact, where I picked this up first was Roberto Assagioli.
Yes, very famous, sure.
And his writings are fantastic. And what I was reading yesterday was, yes, that in his words, he talks about subpersonalities. We have multiple subpersonalities, I think, and therefore we have multiple identities. One element of genius is to know which subpersonality to draw on in a particular set of circumstances. So, the lady I spoke with yesterday, the giggling schoolgirl may be the right person to go out with her friends for a drink after work, particularly perhaps her girlfriends, not being sexist or misogynistic, but that might be a fun way of showing up in that environment. It's not a great identity to bring to the fore in the boardroom, but the part of the genius then is to be able to unconsciously draw on the right personality, the right genius in the right moment, the right identity in the right moment. A quick example, because it's so clear. For many years, the office of my previous business, the School of Coaching, was in the heart of London, in the West End. And my wife would frequently complain that she hated meeting me for lunch when I was at work. And she said something about, that suit you wear or something. And I kind of was dismissive and didn't understand it. And then when I learned about subpersonalities, of course, I began to understand it, because I went to work and I put on my suit, but I wasn't just putting on a suit, I was putting on a whole identity, which is, managing director or founder of the School of Coaching, and speaking to people about that and pretending to be important. And that was one. But the person who comes home and who has half an hour from being in town to driving to the suburbs and has a chance to shed one identity and to begin to inhabit the other one. Of course, when you came home, I took a shower and I changed into shirt and jeans or pullover and jeans. So that helped too. But it was really interesting. I promise you I was the same person, but
So metaphorically, if I understood you right, genius is some kind of an actor, while identity is a mask or a role which that actor can put on his or her face. Or an actor, he can bring another role to life, or even create a new identity. Like an actor can create a new mask or a new type of behavior, for example.
I think it's more fundamental than that, in the sense that it has to have some authenticity behind it. There has to be a root in you from which to grow this new identity. It can't just be something that's totally made up and fabricated. It can't be a mask. Because that will crack and crumble. So for instance, the woman I was speaking with yesterday, the question I asked was, so hold on, she mentioned that she was on the advisory board of a very important academic institution, world famous academic institution. So I said, tell me about the person who shows up at that board.
Mm-hmm.
And described a particular way of being, different kinds of behaviors, attentive, listening to people's needs, summarizing conversations, and then from her experience, putting that into context. A very different kind of statesperson-like. And of course, as she began to tell me, it was a video link, so she started to smile, because she realized that was the identity, that was true and real, but she only did it once a month. When she went to these advisory board meetings, she needed to bring that into the executive team. So, and we then had a conversation about what would that look like in the executive team. And her job over the next few months is to nurture that identity, but it has a real root.
Great. Nurturing identity, it sounds quite interesting as a process.
Yes, yes.
Myles, imagine a burnt out manager, completely devastated and burned out, who feels that her or his work is absolutely mundane, meaningless, and depleting. And there is at least visible genius around the block for many, many years. How can that person unleash or enable that person's genius if he thinks or she thinks like, I want to paint graffiti or become a chef, and I hate that work and I hate that company, for example, or I'm too tired?
Yeah, that can be really difficult, not least in the circumstances in which we live in these days, where it's more difficult to change jobs, more difficult to do anything. And it was difficult enough anyway. Financial security, the needs of other people, our family, our partners, our children, all of these things keep us constrained very much. So I think maybe if I go back, my point is that it's difficult, and you've still got to try and find some way of expressing your genius, otherwise you begin to die. And I mean that both figuratively and literally. One approach is to set a goal in the future, a time, and around which you set up a direction of travel. So and you do things on a regular basis that will take you towards that goal. Do some study, improve your skills, do the activity, but in a minor way. If you want to become a chef, then do more cooking at home. That's almost too simple an idea, but that's the idea. So that's one possibility. The other is that if the route to what you're passionate about is firmly closed, you then need to find another element, another thing at which you can express yourself. So personally, I enjoy writing poetry. I can kind of draw and kind of paint. I play tennis. I cook, and I coach. And then in my main job, I'm writing programs for a mobile learning. All of those things I can be genius at. The truth is that the mobile learning platform takes up 80% of my time. So tennis is really important as another way of expressing myself, of expressing my genius. So you got to find something even if it's for half an hour a week in which you find yourself expressed. Otherwise, as I said, you die.
Great. And there was a very workable idea of doing something in small steps. Even if you can't change everything, you just start moving with baby steps towards direction you think might be interesting for you.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Okay, how do you think the genius concept is connected with, again, concepts or ideas of one's calling or personal mission or life purpose? And what do you think about those ideas which sometimes people have?
Total connection. Perhaps just a different way of expressing the same idea. I like the idea of genius because it there's an expression people use, and I'm trying to remember it, is to be the best version of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of I don't like that because it gives you the possibility of saying, well, that was the best version of me. I couldn't be any better. It provides, right? So there's a get out clause in the definition. There's nothing in following your passion or your life's purpose or any of those things. I could kind of see somebody smoking some drug and doing that, kind of, what I'm talking, no, what genius does is it provides a kind of an imperative to do more than your best, to be utterly committed, because you can't half do genius. In the same way that you can't half do a cartwheel, the physical exercise that acrobats might do. You can't half commit to doing a cartwheel. You fall over in the middle. You've got to commit totally. So genius demands a different level of commitment than some of the other things. I think if you ask me one thing that I would have loved to have learned earlier in my life, it would be that natural talent isn't enough. That the amount of work you have to put in order to really express yourself fully is enormous. And I think many people find that they're quite good at something, and they think that they're a natural, and they think therefore that they don't have to learn. And it's disastrous. I think we've lost so much genius, so much beauty, so much expression in the world by portraying through the media and through our cultural ways of thinking that people are gifted. You may have some talents, but then you got to work on them. That goes back to Carol Dweck, who wrote that book called Mindset. Yeah, just between a fixed mindset. So the interesting thing
and growth mindset
that thinking you're talented or that you're a natural or that you have some gift is actually very often a fixed mindset.
Yeah,
rather than a growth mindset. Yes.
And how do you think, where can we find that level of commitment? It's I'm asking that question because sometimes people start, just waiting. As in perhaps a wrong understanding of the Chinese proverb that you just sit on the riverbank and wait until there is a corpse of your enemy is getting down the river. So I just have to wait, and maybe someday that world will show me what's my purpose or my calling, and I will wait. And that's not something that looks like becoming committed to anything. How can somebody find that commitment or grow that commitment inside themselves?
Okay, and it's the second expression, grow it. That's the key. So I've got two ways of thinking about. I'm sure there are many others. One of them comes from actually a book of Galway's that isn't very, Tim Galway, the author of the Inner Game series, that isn't very well known and it's difficult to find, called his second book. He wrote two books on tennis. His second book was called Inner Tennis, and at the end of it, he talks about the will, and he talks about will vectors. So what he's suggesting is that the will is not targeted on one thing, that there will be many competing desires that one has that will, so I have a desire to play tennis and to be fit. I also have a desire to have a beer with my wife, or what she doesn't drink, you know what I mean, in the evening. So some of my aims are in conflict. And so the first step is to understand what are the different competing desires, what is in conflict and what isn't, and to start making better choices about what you do. But unless you have clarity about what the competing desires are, you can't pick it out. So that's one place to start, because at least then you know that when you're kidding yourself, you know that you're kidding yourself. Then the second thing to go to is what you said, it's about growth. And Assagioli, Psychosynthesis, wrote a book called The Act of Will. And a large part of that book is about how you grow your will from very simple disciplines and exercises in there. There's one that's as simple as having the determination to visualize writing your name a number of times on something like a blackboard. And by just simply by doing a very simple task and being dedicated to that very simple. So the last thing I said was, of course, your desire, your will be related to your sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm. Myles, how do you think? Again, some people have that idea that there might be a risk if I use my will to grow my commitment to some work or to some way of living. Is it something I just made up, or it's something which is connected to my inner self, or which is kind of connected to my genius? I mean, some people get into different activities too easily, you know? They like one thing, tomorrow they like another thing, and they are very windy, I would say, about that. And how can those people find that feeling that, yes, I'm building or growing my strong will, not about something which is not fundamental?
So everything we're speaking about, in some sense, comes together. That you at some point you might want to make a choice about what you want to do in the world, the impact you want to make for both for you and for others. And later in life, that might be about the legacy, what you want to leave behind. You can ignore those questions, and engage in all kinds of different things that might be distracting. And I'm not going to blame anybody for doing that, because I don't know what life is about. I've decided that life is about me expressing myself fully in it and helping other people do that. That's a decision I've made. But I'm not going to blame anybody else for making another decision. I think if somebody came to me, well, I know that if somebody came to me with that as an issue, Myles, I'm good at all these things and I'm afraid of committing to one thing, I'd be really interested in what really is the fear. I've known people who who are talented and who have a desire in a particular discipline, or particularly it shows up in sport, where there is a fear of winning, because if I win, then I suddenly put myself, I become the target. I've got to keep winning, and the pressure of that is just too much. So I'd rather kind of be an almost winner and have lots of friends than be the number one, have fewer friends. That's the fear. And have to prove myself again and again and again. That would be just so. But that's typically an imagined thing rather than a real thing. So you need to understand, if somebody's distracted and not committed, what is it that's getting in the way? What is it stopping them? What is the fear?
Yeah, totally makes sense. You already mentioned that you have worked with sportsmen, including rugby coaches and tennis players and so on. And many of them find their calling in early childhood. Many sportsmen start doing sports while they were a child, right? And that's how the whole sports system works. When the system finds the most talented young women and men to grow their sports potential. But many people who work in offices, in corporate world, they know that they weren't connected with their talents when they were children, right? And they
Yes.
and they are looking onto those sportsmen or musicians or artists who found their talents in their early childhood, and they just get very unmotivated with that, you know, that I'm not sure what my talents are, and I didn't find them in my early childhood. So what could you, how you work with people like this? What do you ask them, or what do you help them to see?
Yeah, we think we've had a slight break, and that can be very difficult because we're potentially getting into an area with medical implications around depression. So if I'm in this conversation with somebody, I'm very, very cautious, and there may be other issues that are of a psychological nature going on here, which is, why nobody told them that they were any good. I remember once somebody I was coaching, a child, and I was being very encouraging, and at the end of a session, this is when I was teaching tennis in my youth, she said to me, "Why are you the only person who says to me I'm any good at anything?"
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's pretty bloody awful. It's a very difficult area. So you've got to be careful that you don't start pretending you're a psychologist. So that's the first kind of health warning. But you start with enjoyment. You try and find out from that person what are the things they enjoy doing. What do you do in your free time? Obviously, we're excluding things like television because that's the most appalling of all distractions. But the only place I know is to start with what people enjoy, what interests them, and the worst case I ever had was with a friend who apparently had no interests.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did was we made a list of 20 things that he could be interested in. And he went and he did those things for a week or two, or investigated them, or tried them, or whatever it was. And then we kept on narrowing the list. But in that case, there was something that he wanted to spend more time on. But what also emerged was that there was a need to get some psychological help. It's a great question, I don't have a better answer than that.
Sure. Every situation is unique, so of course there is no question which fits to any situation.
In terms of genius, one of the propositions within the Genius book is that everybody can develop a unique individual genius, and it may take a little time to find it.
Many people in corporate world who are stuck in that feeling of being burnt out and feeling some kind of anxiety and misunderstanding, or like not understanding what to do next. Many of those people have that fear that if I find my purpose, or if I enable my genius, I will have to leave that corporation, I will have to leave that work, I will, following my mission, I will be, a clown on the street, or something like that, and I won't be able to earn some money, and I will, die somewhere in a puddle of mud.
Which may be true.
Yeah.
so clearly there's going to be a trade-off. But I want to take one step back because you've rightly introduced the corporate world into the conversation, because that's where you and I work, and where most people spend most of their life. And that's interesting, that we might spend most of our life in a place that we hate is not great. Taking one step back, most in your country and in mine and in many others are institutions of education, and in some places religion. Many of our societal norms are about generating a society that is compliant.
Mm-hmm.
We need people to do the difficult jobs. And in this COVID-19 situation, it's really been reflected that the people who are on the front line can't afford not to go to work. So we create a compliant society where people jump through the hoops, get the education that they think they need to get the job that they think they're going to want in order to have the family that they think and very quickly you're trapped. So the system is designed to trap you. And the bad news is that most of us have been not just compliant, but also complicit. We are responsible for being compliant. We are complicit in this charade. So sure, so each of us has a very difficult choice to make at some point, which is that, do I want to stay in this system and have the security that I think I might have, which may change, and be a good member of society and wear myself out, or am I going to express myself? But that's a very stark choice. And anytime we have a polarity about something binary like that, I get nervous. It's often possible to find something in the place of work that you're good at, how you manage your team, how you create proposals, how you write, how you think, how you solve problems, how you attend to your customers or clients. It's often possible to find something in there that actually gives you satisfaction and joy. So do more of it, get better at it. That's one step, and that's one way of going. There's another way of going, which is to remember that you only work 8 hours a day, and you've got the rest of the day and the weekend, and you find something in which you excel and you enjoy, and you make that your genius, and you make that your focus. And yes, you go to work 9 to 5, but the world starts after that. It's not easy.
The first part, thank you, was exactly what I wanted you to ask about. Perhaps to find some words of encouragement according to your experience. Are there many people, or how often do you meet your clients or players who are expressing their genius and enabling their genius at work, and they get happy while working in a corporate world, even if they were stuck someday in their past?
Yes. And there's a way in which I'm quite selective about who I work with. Part of that is a financial thing, that they're usually relatively senior and they can pay my fees. But the other side of that is I don't always charge. So I'm working with at least 2 people at the moment who aren't paying fees. But I'm working with them because either they're really interesting and doing something important, or because they're yes, in one case they're doing something really important that's related to the current health situation, and people don't often see the opportunity. So a person I was coaching earlier this week in a quite senior job, but still kind of management rather than leadership, had been asked to take on a new task, which meant going beyond his current organization and bringing people together from different organizations. And he had completely misunderstood or not seen that this was an opportunity to lead and to shape something that will actually impact the national economy, because he works in a government office. Mm-hmm. And that it was a chance to do things his way, because there's no oversight. There's very small oversight. He has a sponsor rather than a manager in this, and he just hadn't seen it. And you could see in the conversation as he began to create a vision, just as we were speaking, for how he could do that. So yes, most of his work, 80%, was going to be relatively mundane. But then he realized that actually he was going to have to manage his team differently. So that became interesting. So from a board compliant senior manager to somebody who thought, wow, I could, if I do deliver that project with the external people, my profile will raise, I'll learn new things, it's important, blah, blah, blah.
By the way, sometimes people think that if I follow my mission, or I have connected with my genius and I keep on expressing it, it's gonna be always interesting, joyful, and easy.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
You're going to spend some time being disappointed. I don't always enjoy the physical exercise I do in order to stay fit, or fit enough to compete, and fit enough to manage my injuries. I've had to learn. My essential gift is as an author. I think things and I write things and I put them out in the world. On this mobile learning platform that I've mentioned, where we're writing role plays for avatars, and we're writing so that something will make sense, when it appears on a mobile phone screen, which is centimeters wide and centimeters long. It's not a book. It's a completely different discipline. And I actually became ill as I learned that discipline because it was so hard. And I was and everything I did was wrong. But I got to a point after about a year in which it became fun. It became like a puzzle. How am I going to solve this one? So sometimes in order to get to the required level of skill or fitness or ability, you have to put in some hard work. And that's back to what I said earlier, which is that I came to writing really very easily. Very easily. And so I thought I had a gift, but boy, do you have to work at it. I came to tennis very easily. There was no coaching in Ireland when I was growing up. It was it's a growth mindset.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Okay, thank you, Myles. A couple of personal questions. Last ones. When and how did you become connected with your genius? When did you start enabling it?
I think, and this is the point of genius, is that it mutates, it changes, and in different points of your life, you choose different kinds of expression or different identities to express your genius. So I picked up Tim Galway's book when I was already an architect, and I had already worked out that I didn't want to stay an architect. I didn't want to stay in a compliance society where in 15 years' time I was going to be a partner. I could see the pathway, and I wasn't interested. There was no creativity, no expression of life for me in that. So when I read The Inner Game of Tennis, it was like, it was showing me something I kind of already knew. And I went and I found the people. I was living in Dublin. I went and found the people in London who were part of Tim's group. He trained them. And I spent a few days with them, and then 6 months later, I left my job as an architect. So I found a moment of inspiration, and I think my good fortune in life is that I've never been afraid of making a change, which has had huge consequences, some of which my wife has had to bear. So, and then there have been other moments. The understanding the latest version, becoming an author, happened about 5 years ago when I was trying to build a project with Tim Galway around putting coaching on a mobile platform. And I was playing the role of convener of a team of 4, effectively of managing director. I was starting to look for finance. I was talking to clients, and suddenly realized that I was effectively, without anybody asking me to, I was the managing director of this small startup company. And I got really clear that it was very, very depressing, not what I was enjoying, not what I was put on the earth to do. And then it took me probably 5 or 6 conversations with a very good friend before I got clear that actually what I am is an author. I think thoughts, I conceptualize them, I make them communicable, I write or I speak. And the minute I realized that, things began to change.
Great. And then the last question, let's make it sound. How would you describe your personal mission now in these days?
I haven't, there's a personal part of that, which is about thinking. I'm 60, my wife is 69, we have grandchildren. So there's a part of that which is actually about creating a lifestyle that is more in touch with the world, more in touch with the environment, more about growing things, more about our grandchildren, more about being together. So it's the next phase, and that's coming into focus. The current phase is that the thing that's excited me most about the world of learning, and particularly the world of coaching, is that at one point, a guy who'd been on the School of Coaching program, who'd been a very difficult client, at the end of his program said, I know I've been difficult. He said, that wasn't intentional. He said, I really wanted to understand. But what you don't know is, as I'm the headmaster of a school with 2,000 people in it, he said, that has become a learning institution. And that includes the teachers. So he brought, and I hadn't even run the program. I had this image of the two people who had run the program. I dropped a pebble into a pond, and that ripple had caused the two people running it to reach this particular headmaster. And that was just one of 20 people. And he had reached 2,000 people. And so the mission has always been to try and get the message of genius, the message of self-expression to as many people as possible. And we've, for instance, on the mobile learning platform with a client in China, we've just signed up 1,800 people on the program.
Great.
And they're learning. So I found a vehicle that can get them this kind of message out to thousands of people. And so that's the mission at the moment, to reach as many people as possible.
Thank you so much, Myles. I hope that our talk and our interview will reach as many people as possible also.
Very good close.
It was a great pleasure to talk to you again. So thank you for that possibility to share your ideas with the Russian audience.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me.
Что ж, спасибо Майлзу за интервью. Мне кажется, это было потрясающе интересно и полезно. Если вам было интересно и полезно, ставьте лайк, подписывайтесь на канал, жамкайте колокольчик и рассказывайте, пожалуйста, знакомым, коллегам, друзьям об этой серии интервью. Если вы еще не смотрели, обязательно посмотрите интервью с Еленой Рязановой, с Шисинми, с Борисом Холмянским. И подписывайтесь на Медиуме, на мой блог, в Фейсбуке, в Инстаграм. Все ссылки тоже есть в описании. Кроме этого, я хочу анонсировать следующее интервью. Это интервью с тоже замечательным американским, в этот раз не британским, а американским коучем и автором методики Life's Core Purpose, или «Главная цель жизни». Автор этой методики Джеффри Пелетье. И это будет безумно интересно, потому что он наконец-то поможет нам разложить по полочкам, что такое призвание, личная миссия, предназначение. И мы поговорим с ним о процедуре Life's Core Purpose, которая по-настоящему глубоко изменила мою жизнь, и я думаю, что она сможет изменить вашу. Кроме того, у меня есть программа «Маяк», которая предназначена для руководителей, топ-менеджеров и владельцев компаний разного масштаба. Эта программа помогает определить и непрерывно придерживаться своей личной миссии, призвания, предназначения в повседневной, деловой, профессиональной деятельности. Эта программа предназначена для тех, кто находится в состоянии выгорания, либо то, что я называю триадой туман, болото и кандалы. Туман — это когда я не знаю, чего я хочу, вокруг меня слишком много всего, все то, что драйвило меня, что заставляло меня двигаться вперед, уже отгрохотало и мне неинтересно. Болото — это отсутствие энергии, когда каждый день, как какой-то тягомотный день сурка, я не понимаю, зачем я занимаюсь этим, почему я должна продолжать делать то-то и так далее. А кандалы — это то, что тянет нас вниз. У меня есть ипотека, у меня есть обязательства, а вдруг я не найду новую работу, а вроде бы хотелось это сменить, но это тяжело и удерживает меня. У меня нет уверенности в том, куда мне нужно двигаться. И людям, кто испытывает эти три вещи, туман, болото и кандалы, мы помогаем найти ясность собственной миссии, ясность того, чем я занята или занят и хочу заниматься. Мы помогаем обрести энергию, двигаться к реализации этой миссии и обрести уверенность в том, что действительно это она, и я действительно здесь нахожусь, на этой земле, в этом мире, в этой компании для того, чтобы эту миссию реализовывать. Это интересный интенсив, поэтому если, опять же, эта тема актуальна, ссылка в описании. Спасибо и до новой встречи с Джеффом Пелетье. Это будет очень интересно. Пока.